Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today, we're going to be taking a look at several different starting positions. I wanted to do this for a couple of reasons. One, to give all of you a bit more on this very critical turn in the start of your civilization, more so than we were able to do in the Absolute Beginner's Guide. But I also wanted to do it to give myself a little bit more practice as well. We're starting with some pretty standard map settings to include a standard map size, which is good for 8 players. I also chose the continents map type because it's a pretty default map in the game. It'll give us a couple of large land masses, possibly some small islands, and an ocean of water in between. Now we're going to be looking at several using a standard start position, and then afterwards we're going to be taking a look at several more using a legendary start position. And the reason why I want to do this is because a lot of pros and creators alike use the legendary starts just to make sure they're not getting ripped off from the very start of the game. There's not a huge difference that I have found in the two start types, but we're going to be able to take a closer look at that in this video. So without further ado, let's get going. Now the first thing we need to do when we're analyzing our start position is look at the civilization that we rolled as well. Whether or not we chose random like I did here, or if you're using one specific civilization. In this case, of Robert the Bruce in the Scottish Empire, we're going to be getting extra great scientists and great engineering points as long as our cities are happy. So this might push us towards a scientific and industrial sort of gameplay. So we want to keep our eyes out for start positions that lead to that strategy. Also, we have the ability to build a golf course, although this isn't immediately available, so not necessarily something we have to take into account at first. And here's our starting position for the Scottish Empire now. To start off with, I like to look at the first ring around our potential settling site. And what we mean by first ring is just the ring of tiles around the city center, or the potential city center. In this case, in our first ring, we have 1 wheat, we have a crab, and we have some silver. In the second ring, we do have a 3 food oasis, another wheat, and that's about it. Yeah, there is a couple of 2 production tiles out here, and even a 3 production tile in the form of this Plains Hill with woods on them. That could be handy, but it's going to be a little while before we gain access to it. We also have a reef here, which would be nice if we had some land adjacencies to put a campus there, but sadly we don't, as it looks like the land is cut off right here. Another thing we like to do when looking at the start positions is use your warrior to do some initial scouting. Because I don't think I would be moving more towards the desert or more towards this coastline, I'm going to go out this way and see what else we find, hoping to reveal a little bit more of this area here. And sadly, not much. Because of this start, if I was going to move the settler, it potentially might be just down 1 tile to settle the wheat. And that way, at least all the tiles in our first ring were workable. Because as it stands, we would be starting off with 1 production for our city center and 1 production from either the rainforest or the wheat, which is not great. We wouldn't even be working this 3 gold tile, at least until you get a mine in place. I wouldn't settle the silver itself, which I know some players have a tendency of doing. You would get instant access to the amenity, but you'd never get access to be able to work the tile with its improvement, in this case a mine, so you'd be missing out on some potential yields there as well. While I would probably re-roll this start, if I have to pick a position, I would go down to this wheat and settle here. This will give us the Eureka for sailing, for starting on a coast, and that's about it. Now in this video, I'll always just grab a random tech, choose some quick production after we settle the city, and click the next turn, just for the ability to be able to move the warrior 1 more time to further look at the start position. Because your start position matters more than just your initial city location. We're also looking at where our second city is going to be going. And here I see some great potential for a second city. Not only did we find a city-state, in this case it's Armagh, which allows builders to make a monastery improvement, which is kind of good, especially in a faith game, but we also have access to honey, a beautiful 5-yield banana tile. So while Robert the Bruce and the Scottish Empire don't have a great-looking first city, at least to start with, it seems like their second city wouldn't be doing too bad. Also take note, I didn't want to fail to mention that we only have 4 housing in our capital city because there is no fresh water. So the argument could have been made to move down to either this tile or this tile to settle the city, but then that would have pushed us to a turn 2 start. While I don't love this tile here because of the significant reduction in yields, particularly when it comes to losing the woods and the rainforest initially, at least this would give us fresh water and still a coastal start. But another thing to keep in mind as we're going through this video, this is a subjective look at starting positions. Depending on you and the strategies you like to play, you might find one that's a little bit better. But by us talking about it and taking a deeper dive, you may be able to pull a couple of nuggets out that'll help you in your civilization journey. Let's go check out the next start position. All I'll do is go up to the menu and click Restart. This time we have Saladin and the Arabian Empire, and about the only thing that is relevant here is the madrasa, which would lead you to getting a very strong campus district so you get the bonus faith as well. My initial thought on this map start is, wow, we're going to have some nice production. But typically when you see all that nice production, it means you're going to have a lack of growth. But there's a couple of saving points for this start. The first is we have lots of fresh water in the form of a couple of rivers here. We also have a wonderful sheep tile that can be improved with a pasture. And when we're looking at these bonus resources, it's always important to know what their improvement's going to be. And in this case, the pasture is going to give us +1 production, but it's also going to give us a little bit of housing. But further down the road, it'll even give us food and a little bit more production. It also has some nice gypsum, which are improved by quarries, which will give us another production here. And while there's no other yields that we're going to be able to get from that, the future holds quite a bit of production. Not to mention the fact by having 2 of the resource means we'll be able to sell one off to the AI pretty early. I'm still going to take the opportunity to move our warrior. A couple of things to look at when we're doing our early scouts is if I moved inside these woods here, we wouldn't gain much visibility because the warrior can't really see through the woods. Whereas if I went over onto this hill, I might get better visibility here. I'm also concerned about what is right over here. The reason being is our settler, because of these hills, only has visibility of 1 tile over, which makes me concerned of what is sitting over here for the potential future of our city. So I think in this case, I would be moving onto this gypsum. First, it would cause me to move here, and then here, and unfortunately that didn't give me much more visibility either, but it did reveal something very important. There's a fountain of youth here, which means this start position is very, very strong. Let's go ahead and settle, and I'll show you why. Oh, it's even better than I thought. It also has an early tea tile and some grassland hills here with 2 foods. I would definitely be expanding over into this tea as soon as possible, and that way we get the free science. There's also a nice plains hill that has a woods feature on it. This is all pretty good. For alternate settling locations, you could consider this plains hill tile here, because it means your starting city would have started with 2 food and 2 production. As a reminder, your capital will always boost the food yield to 2 or normalize it to 2, and you'll get what's naturally available on the tile itself. But in the case of a plains hill, you'll keep the 2 production. Now, in a grassland hill, for instance, right here, you do not get 2 production because, as you can see, the tile itself only has 1 production. But in these plains hills, you'd get 2 food and 2 production. But there's another couple of reasons for settling in place. First, let me show you what it looked like right before we settled. Now, by moving the warrior down by 1 tile, we could have gotten better visibility and seen that this T was here. That may have given you more cause to settle on this plains hill here. But then we would have lost having the gypsum in our first ring. Not to mention, this tile doesn't have any fresh water. So when it comes down to it, your options were either here or here, which in the sheep, you would have been given a plains hill for 2 production, plus you would have access to work this 1 food 3 production, which is pretty good. And this tile here, you'd still have access to the 2 food 2 production, and quite a bit of production over on these wood tiles. But again, you'd lose the gypsum, although you would be a little bit closer to the maize, or as my Spanish-speaking friends like to tell me, it is Maíz. But I did want to show you a little bit closer to the Fountain of Youth so you can see what awaits us. The Fountain of Youth would give us +4 science, +4 faith, and fresh water. Not to mention, all the land combat units that enter it receive the Water of Life ability, which gives them +10 HP when healing in any territory. But what might even be better than this very powerful natural wonder is the fact that you get error score for finding the natural wonder, and it also boosts astrology. Now I can tell you what I would end up doing is making sure that my second city is somewhere around here, which based on the yields and everything around here wouldn't be much of a problem. So it looks like Saladin in Arabia would be off to a pretty good start. Let's head to map number 3. Next, we have Lady Six Sky in the Mayan Empire, which does have a couple of interesting caveats. First, they have the Mayab ability, which means settling adjacent to fresh water and coast does not provide extra housing. Instead, they get extra housing from farm, and they get +1 production for every adjacent observatory, and +1 gold, and +1 amenity for every luxury adjacent to the city center. So this tells us we don't necessarily have to settle on fresh water, but we do want a lot of farmable land. And it looks like we do have some decent farmable land here. While I don't love seeing the tundra tiles, unless you're one of those few civs that can make decent use of them, such as Canada and Russia, at least this comes with some beautiful jade. And the reason why this is so important is because any tile that gives you something other than food or production in the early game, especially culture, is very powerful. Now, if we'd settle here, we would still end up working the 2 food, 2 production tile here and would wait until we get a second pop, but then I would instantly put it into this culture tile. And remember, to improve the jade and get access to the amenity, we would need to put down a mine, which would give us +1 to production, so this tile would end up being decent. But we also have a few other options here. Notice the cattle is a great bonus resource for some early growth, as is this marsh tile. But then look right up here. We have a 2 food, 2 production, and culture tile in the form of the silk. This makes me extremely interested in this area here because A, I still get the cultural bonus for the silk, but also allows me to move a little bit further away from this tundra. So I'm going to take our warrior and move straight out here, and oh my goodness, it is another natural wonder. As far as standard starts go, these last 2 have been fairly incredible. This is a 4-tile natural wonder providing +1 faith and +1 science to adjacent tiles. So I think while looking at this, I'm going to try to hit this natural wonder from 2 sides. First, I'm going to settle a city close enough to where we can work some of these tiles here, and then close enough to where our second city will be on the other side of the natural wonder. So in this case, I think I would move over to here, and because we're crossing a river, it's going to take all of our movement points, so we would not be able to settle on turn 1. That would be okay in my book. But then this second turn settle right here gives us immediate access to this 2 food, 2 production, and cultural tile that we would start working immediately. In fact, I'd end up locking this in. And then as we expand, this third ring is going to have access to some wonderful tiles here. And we'll even take a better look at the surrounding area. Oh, wow, look at these yields. This gives us a lot of potential here. Initially to a +4 holy site. Because we're playing Lady Six Sky, remember the observatory is not 1-for-1 the same as a campus. Instead, we get more bonuses for having adjacency to farms than we would mountains. But any other campus gets +1 science from every mountain. And then you combine that with something like a government plaza, and you'd have a significant campus and holy site spot. But in this case, we would want to circle the observatory with as many farms as we could, so something like this might not be too bad. So while their first ring isn't overpowered other than the beautiful silk tile, the future expansion of the Mayan Empire looks really nice indeed, mostly thanks to the natural wonder sitting here. Let's head on to the next one. This time we've started as Hammurabi and the Babylonian Empire. While they do have some very nice district bonuses, our biggest interest as far as start positions go with its unique building in the Palgam. They receive it pretty early at irrigation, and they provide +1 housing and +2 production, plus freshwater tiles receive +1 food. But the city must be adjacent to a river. And we are adjacent to a river. Unfortunately, we're also adjacent to a lot of floodplains. Remember, when you have floodplains scattered amounts like this, you may want to accelerate your construction of a dam in the city. While it's great after the river floods and you get some bonuses, losing all your important improvements can set you back several turns. Not to mention, if you actually settle a city on a floodplain, you could lose some population as well. With that being said, this tile is not on a floodplains. It is a grasslands hills, so we know we'd be getting the 2 food and 1 production. Some people might like to settle on this dies here for the automatic +1 faith. It would also move you a little bit closer to some improved production tiles in the form of these grassland hills and the rainforest. But this first ring doesn't look too bad, especially considering we have the deer, which once we put a camp down is going to give us the +2 gold and half a housing. Not to mention future yields as we make our way through the tech tree. So this would be a valuable tile to be able to work once it's improved. Plus we have some early growth tile here in the form of the rice. And then like I said in the last couple of starts, any tile that you can start with an extra yield such as faith or culture can be really powerful. In this case, this extra faith would allow you to get a pantheon that much quicker. We still want to explore a little bit just to make sure we're happy with what we have found. Since our settler is in the center of our visibility, it doesn't really matter which way we want to go. I'm guessing this is a coast, although it could just be another river from the looks of it. So I'm going to take the path of the most visibility, and that's going to be down 2 tiles, where, oh my goodness, I cannot tell you how incredibly lucky it is to have found 3 natural wonders in the last 3 starts. That doesn't happen, folks. This is another 4-tile natural wonder that's providing +2 food and +2 culture. Well, I can tell you where the second city would end up going. There's our free boost for astrology, and don't forget our wonderful era score bonus. So hypothetically, I would settle in place here. We get the bonus era score for being on a river that could flood, and you'll see that the computer is going to want to work the 2 food, 1 production, and 1 faith, depending on your strategy. You may prefer to work the growth tile, or you may prefer to split it down the middle and work the 2 food, 2 production tile. Either way, I don't think you can go wrong. Personally, I would probably work the faith tile or work the accelerated growth tile to try to grow quicker and then get my second pop on this tile here. But that depends on a lot of factors. For instance, maybe we find an early tribal village which gives us access to another population. Now, one disadvantage of this natural wonder is I don't see any fresh water, although there is a river coming down this way. So it would require a little bit more exploration to find out where we want to settle a city here. But settling a city here, we definitely would. Culture is so very important in the early game, and there's one of those early floods that we talked about, which would improve all these yields. Oh, and then there's the first city-state in the Vatican City. It does look like the river does pass through here, so a potential city on one of these 2 tiles would give us this natural wonder on its second ring, maybe having another city on this side, so its second ring would have this side of the natural wonder. Not to mention, the mountains would lead to some decent holy sites and campuses. Now, as ridiculous as these starts are, I think it's about time to go and take a look at some legendary starts. In order to do that, we have to exit back to main menu, go back to single player, create a game. I'm going to reset all of this to back to what we were looking at. Then we go to advanced setup, start position, legendary, and start game. With that being said, some of those last couple of starts with those natural wonders looked absolutely amazing. Starting with the Japanese Empire this time. In the long term, we would have access to the electronics factory. That doesn't really impact our start. Although we do build encampments, holy sites, and theater square districts in half the time, so that might lead you to making sure that you have a start that works well with those districts. At initial look, I am not in love with this quote-unquote legendary start. I'm not saying it's bad, it just doesn't look legendary. For one, our warrior's exploration is sort of stuck behind here. Our first move is going to be into the rainforest, which is not going to tell us much at all. Now, settling a city here would give us immediate access to a 2 gold and 2 production tile, which is pretty good. Not to mention access to crabs and fish in the second ring. In fact, based on this setup and my inability to see out here, one potential start might be up on this tile because of this wonderful first ring. And as you see, when we settle here, we're still going to gain access to the 2 gold being given to us from the copper. So instantly having a 2 food, 2 production, and 2 gold start is pretty good. Not to mention the fact that in our first ring here, we're getting access to the 3 gold crabs, fishing boat improvements, which will not only give us extra food and housing, but throughout the tech tree, they add a smattering of other yields, such as more gold, food, and production. But again, the exploration here leaves something for the wanting. We still don't have any idea what's down here. We'll play a quick turn or two, just so we can take a look at the surrounding areas. Yeah, we have access to a silk, which might make another coastal city down here decent. But remember, Kyoto is only going to start with the 4 housing because they lack fresh water. Granted, you're going to be able to get some of that housing back with the fishing boats that you improve. All right, so further south, we did find a city-state. This one's Nalanda, which is good. It's going to provide extra science because I don't see a great campus district. If we would have settled in place in Kyoto, we would have had a decent campus here on this tile here because it's next to a reef, but it might not be that much better than a campus placed in between 2 rainforests and put adjacent to a government plaza. But by meeting Nalanda so very quickly, we would have a better than not chance becoming their suzerain, which would give us access to the Mahavihara, which is an improvement that would give us +2 science, +1 housing, +1 faith for every adjacent holy site, and +1 science for every adjacent campus district, which could help shore up some of what this start lacks. Either way, I'd recommend a quick expansion out of Kyoto to try to see what else we can find here. Let's move on to another legendary start. This time we're starting with the Ethiopian Empire and Menelik II, and we have a very important consideration when settling our cities because of the Council of Ministers. We're going to receive science and culture equal to 15% of our faith generation in cities founded on hills. Not to mention we have access to the rock-hewn church, which gives us extra faith for adjacent mountain and hill tiles. And it looks like the AI knew that because it's given us a bunch of hills. Not to mention that, but we've also started just 2 tiles away from a natural wonder. Now, I don't love the fact that we're right next to this desert here, but it really does not matter in terms of this start because this is a very, very strong start. I would take the warrior and move up a little bit, finding out what else we could see. And to be honest, I think I would end up moving to this deer tile here because that would give us 6 culture in our first ring. Not to mention access to the wine in our first ring and even some copper. Gold would not be a problem in this starting city location. Not to mention further out in our second ring, we have access to 2 sheep, a stone, even more copper down here. Now this is a plains hill, so we would get 2 food and 2 production, but another bonus of moving up here is we would get rid of this desert tile as well. Yeah, it would cost us 1 turn here, so we wouldn't be able to settle until turn 2. But by settling on the deer, we're giving a 3 production and 2 food tile from the rip. Not to mention access to working a lot of culture. I'd probably start off with the food. I think this is the right choice by the AI. And then I'd go immediately into start trying to work some of these culture tiles or possibly expanding into some of these sheep for the extra food as well. Because one thing that this capital does hurt on, while it has the housing, it does not have a lot of food growth. Now, when we get access to the plantation and the +2 gold and slowly start to improve this wine tile, we'd have a little bit more food. Another thing to keep in mind with this start is the volcano here, and it is active. So you will spend some time repairing these improvements that you make on these tiles. Now, I see we have more desert around us, which is not always great. So I think on our exploration, I'd go up here and see what's over here. Already we have a 7 out of 11 era score because of the bonuses from both the natural wonder and settling near a volcano. And further exploration does show us that we're going to have access to a marble on our third ring. There's a couple of reefs here, which makes me want to explore over in here because we need to find that second city location. And unfortunately, things do not look great over here. With our brand new scout, I would probably end up checking south. Yes, and this is where we'd end up putting that second city. While it's not bonkers, it does give us the requisite 3 tiles away from this city, and this is decently strong. It has access to cocoa, another fish, and up here is just more desert. It's got a little bit of grasslands, but then we're hit with tundra. So it looks like the best expansion would be south. So while this first city location is absolutely incredible, I think you might have some issues putting down some future cities. Although, being up here towards the desert and the tundra leaves a lot of tribal villages for us and only us. And it does look like further south, the desert does give away to more grasslands, so maybe the expansion wouldn't be too bad. Plus, there's always potential for a nice desert city if you manage to rush towards Petra. Let's take another look at another luxury start. Next up, we have the wonderful Gandhi, and about the only consideration we need to make is the fact that we have access to the stepwell. Now, the stepwell will give us +1 food and housing, and +1 faith if adjacent to a holy district, +1 food if adjacent to a farm, and additional housing, faith, and food as you advance through technology and civics tree. But the stepwell cannot be built on hills or adjacent to another stepwell, which so far doesn't look like it's going to be that big of a deal because we don't have too many hills here. In fact, it looks like just the right amount. We have plenty of fresh water in and around here. This is a plains hill, so if we settled on this copper, we would be getting 2 food, 2 production, and 2 gold, but it would be somewhat risky because you do not know what's over there. We could always take a step right up onto this hill, and it'll show us a little bit more, but just the smattering of all these bonus resources makes me excited for the future of Gandhi's empire. In this case, though, I think I'm going to settle on these deer for a couple of reasons. Yeah, I don't love the fact that it was a woods tile, so we're going to have to wait until turn 2. But remember, when we improve these cattle with pastures, they're going to be worth food and production. And already from the rip, we have access to a 3 food, 1 production sheep tile and plenty of 3 food tiles. So Delhi is going to be able to grow very, very quickly. And you might be looking at it thinking, well, there's not a lot of production here. Remember, we're starting with a 2 production here because we started on a tile with deer. But like I said, as soon as we add pastures here, these are both going to be 3 food production tiles. Not to mention, look at this wonderful diamond that we'd be able to improve by putting a mine on that hill. So all in all, it's not shabby. Now, further over would not have been the greatest idea because of the lack of fresh water, as there was no river sitting around these tiles here, although there is the coastline, so if you wanted to settle a coastal city, but I think that would have been too far away to settle. But these first and second rings here look absolutely incredible. We've already found Kandy, which is a religious city-state, so becoming early friends with them might help Gandhi's strategy. Now, one thing I can say that this area does lack from is amazing district placements. For instance, chances are we would want to go with a holy site, and the only way to really improve this holy site would probably be by yoinking up those cattle, putting a government plaza here, and then we might even be able to put a campus here. So these are okay initial districts, but nothing I'm really in love with. All in all, though, this is not a bad start, thanks to all of the amazing tile improvements here. This is a lot of bonus resources. And just to highlight the point about moving the settler, especially into unknown territory, moving the settler here would have definitely been a mistake. Yeah, you would have had some fresh water, but the first ring here doesn't even come close to comparing to the first ring here. All right, let's check out one more legendary start. Last but not least is Dido and the Phoenician Empire. About the only thing that we need to keep in mind of is that the Phoenician Empire does enjoy coastal cities. We also have access to the Cawthorn, but other than the standard harbor requirements of needing to be built on a coast or lake, doesn't really impact our settling strategy too much. A lot of flat land surrounding our settler and our warrior hence the reason we have so much visibility here. I'm seeing a couple of fishing boats, which would help us considering there's no fresh water here. A reef, which might help with an early campus location, although it would cause us to sacrifice these cattle. Access to honey, which is great for food, which as a reminder, honey is improved by a camp. So this would end up adding 2 gold to a 4 food tile. I think in this case, the only potential for an alternate location might be next to this fresh water here. But with that being said, remember we are playing as Dido and Phoenicia, which likes coastal cities. But remember, the capital itself doesn't necessarily matter because coastal cities founded by Phoenicia and located on the same continent are 100% loyal. And even if we did put a city here, we would still have access to a harbor out here. With that being said though, you'd be taking a chance because we didn't see much more over here. For giggles, we're just going to pass the turn here just to see, for the video's sake, what else is out here. And yeah, it's not much. I don't love this start for Phoenicia. Yeah, we have some rice, some stone, and some cattle. Not to mention the fishing boats. But as far as legendary starts go, I would consider this a below average legendary start. I tend to like strong campuses, so some possible placements for some early districts could be Government Plaza, Campus, and Harbor here, with the campus really benefiting from the reef. You'd also be able to put down maybe a theater square here to make this campus a little bit better, giving yourself a +2 theater square. But all in all, I don't love this starting position. And depending on what else we found, as far as a second city location goes, I think the Phoenician Empire might be a little bit concerned about their start. I hope you enjoyed this video and the further look at Civilization 6. So let me know in the comments below what you think, and if you'd like to see more videos just like this. So until next time, much love, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.